Hi, everyone. We're excited to host the next session, which is a CEO roundtable. We'll have 3 panels with 9 founders over the next 45 minutes. And the first session, I'm excited to have Amjad Masad, CEO and co-founder of Replit, Anurag Goel, founder and CEO of Render, and Hisham Al-Falih, co-founder and CEO of Lean Technologies. So the topic for this session is actually how to ship fast as you scale. So maybe first, I'd like each of you to give a one-line description of your company and what is your current scale. In other words, how many customers use it worldwide, and in what time frame have you achieved that? So I'll start with you, Amjad.
Yeah, so we have so our company Replit. It's like an AI-powered coding platform. So we're probably like the fastest way to go from an idea to a deployed app, and a lot of it is just via prompting. And we have like 30 million users worldwide. And on the sort of customer side, we have on the business side, we have on the order of thousands now. We're kind of new on the B2B, but Replit has generally like massive base of developers worldwide.
And when did you start the company?
2016.
So in 8 years, 30 million customers and thousands of B2B. But Replit is the platform of choice for any developer that starts and wants to code.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Anurag, same question for you. One-line description of what Render does and what is its current scale, and in what time frame did you achieve?
Yeah, Render is a platform for application development teams to ship quickly and to scale on the platform without needing to build out large developer operations teams that need to manage servers on AWS and things like that. So with Render, you don't have to do any of that. We have grown to over 1.5 million developers. We started in 2018, and we launched publicly in 2019. And now, I think there's over 2 million live applications on the platform, and people are creating 300,000 new apps every day.
That's awesome. Okay, so 300,000 new apps almost every day, and pretty much within 5 years since public launch.
Yeah.
Great. Hisham, maybe describe what Lean is and its current scale.
For sure. Before I do that, Assalamu alaikum, I just want to welcome you, Anu, and the rest of the Avra batch to Saudi. I feel compelled to do that. It feels amazing to be here at FII, and a real pleasure to be sharing with you what we do. So Lean Technologies is a platform that enables financial technology to be embedded in every type of business. We provide data and payments connectivity to essentially all types of industries. And we believe that we're enabling the next generation of financial innovation in the Middle East, which is where we are and where we're focused. Today, we serve about 250 businesses between the UAE and Saudi. We're processing about $2 billion of volume just out of the UAE, connecting with millions of end-user accounts. But that's just a drop in the bucket compared to the potential and where we're going. And we've been around for about 5 years now.
5 years, great. Well, since I have the privilege of working with all of them very closely, to keep this session fun, I do know what looks outside very polished, the sausage isn't made very polished. So I'm going to start with you, Amjad. What is one thing that Replit shipped that you're proud of, but it was an absolute hack or a crazy thing that you had to do to get it out the door?
So actually, just recently, we launched this thing called Replit Agent. That's basically a fully automated software developer, and it wasn't a hack. We actually worked on it for 6 months, 7 months, something like that. But it wasn't ready, and we released a beta for our paid customers. So we're like, if you're a ready Replit customer, you can use this AI agent to kind of play with it and give us feedback. And then it went viral. On Twitter, Elon commented on it, and a bunch of people were using it, and millions of people saw what we're doing. And then there was a flood of new customers and users to the platform. And a lot of them had a good time, but the system was struggling because we meant it as a beta for our users. We thought it was going to be a small launch. But honestly, like, it is like trial by fire. And I think it was a good thing. And we moved really fast, and we made it a lot better now.
And so when you were launching, when you thought it was beta, what was your expectation? And then what was your oh shit moment, maybe?
Yeah, we thought like we're going to get like, 100 concurrent users like trying it and like giving us feedback. But then it was in the thousands of concurrent users. So that means concurrent like at the same time. So that means like the servers were struggling. We're spending a lot of money on AI. It was the system was going down. It wasn't really hardened at all. But we always ship things like that. We ship things with flags, and we move the flags slowly. We put things in beta in front of a portion of users. But this time, it just the floodgates opened, and everyone was at the office 24/7 trying to keep the servers up.
That's great. A lot of startups that hit product market fit, people think it's like a slow and linear process, but usually product market fit looks like what you described, which is you don't have a great product and it's still working.
It's like months of nothing, then like a day of everything.
Yes. So Anurag, same question for you. Something that you think render shipped that you were skeptical about but are most proud of in hindsight.
It's usually the other way around, where like I think we can ship something faster, and my team is skeptical about it sometimes, and I need to push them, and I'm like, no, we can do this. So a good example of this was a big pricing change that we just had to make to get our gross margins into a good place. And we knew that, I instinctively knew that the pricing change would work because our customers were finding enough value in the platform to want to pay us more. I kept hearing, render's too inexpensive. And when you hear that, you're like, okay, you're leaving so much money on the table. So I pitched this pricing change to the team. I was like, look, we're going to do this. And we had a whole, we spent 6 months analyzing all the different levers we could pull, and we had these Excel spreadsheets with, 80 different scenarios. And we finally settled on one, and then a month before we were going to ship that, I discovered a flaw in how we were computing the scenarios. And so then I was like, we're just going to go ship this simpler version. And the team was like, no, we can't do it in a month. And so I had to kind of convince them. And it was also an unpopular change because we started charging for seats, which is not very common in usage-based companies. And we charge for compute, but I think a lot of our engineers were like, we don't want to pay for seats. But ultimately, I think you do have a bit of, you can play the CEO card very rarely sometimes, and in this case, I had to play that card and get the team on board. And then in the end, when we shipped the change within a month, the team actually really enjoyed going through that process. And when I asked them and look, okay, what's one of your favorite moments at Render? Even though they were very skeptical about it early on, they were like, yeah, that was a really good moment because we were able to come together, make this change, and the pricing change itself was successful. It actually helped us raise our next round. So I'm pretty proud of that.
That's great. And Hisham, same question for you. Something in Lean that you've shipped in the last 5 years that you're most proud of, but the sausage wasn't like as clean when it went out the door.
Yeah. Well, I totally agree with you, by the way. I think the team usually overestimates how long they need to ship something, and you just got to be very aggressive in trying to drive that outcome. One that strikes me is we had a very important client that was very keen on having a fully automated reconciliation engine. This was back, within the first year of our launch, and they wanted to automatically reconcile every single payment that was initiated through our platform. And I basically, I hope this doesn't get back to them, but I bluffed my way through that client meeting, and I said, we absolutely have this ready, it's deployed, it's in production, it works 100% of the time. And they said, great, let's sign, let's go live next month. I said, great. I went back to my team and I said, guys, we have to build this from scratch now, and it has to work 100% of the time, and it has to be in production. And so just creating that urgency and basically making them feel like they have to make it work for us to capture this incredible client was just enough fuel for them to be able to kind of deliver and ship fast. I will say this with a caveat, though. Lean is a very highly regulated business that it moves money and it accesses very personal financial data associated with customers. So while we do like to push the envelope and ship fast and break things, so to speak, we do have to do it in a way that ensures that we're not sending money to the wrong people or compromising customer data privacy. So that's always a bit of a balancing act that we have to strike.
Yes. In fact, in fintech, there's a saying, go slow to go fast.
Correct.
Right, because you don't want to make a mistake in the money and the payments. But your example of, telling the customer you already have it and then asking your team to build, by the way, that's almost 10 on 10 every startup CEO does.
Yeah.
So I think that's good. I mean, it's sometimes you have to do that and you need to have some urgency to help your team move. Now, to keep it fun and interesting in the last few minutes, I'll do a rapid fire. But do answer. Google, do you think they move fast or move slow, and why?
Slow.
Yes, I know, Amjad, there's a lot of thoughts on Google. You should say, what do you think are the missteps Google has done to move slow?
Well, to be clear, we did a big partnership with Google last year, so they're our partner. I can't say a lot, but I think on the AI side, they have a very competent organization that's DeepMind. And then, when the models are getting productized, it's very slow, and sometimes they're not doing the right things to deploy these models. And so that's what happens when you have a really big company, is that if you have one part of the company that's completely separated from the other part that's making the product, and another one that's delivering the service, it's going to create issues. And I think that's probably what's slowing them down.
And do you think it's communication, cultural? Do you think they have the same intensity as before?
It's probably, there's probably was an intensity issue. I think that's been solved with ChatGPT, right? We all heard the news about the red alert or whatever, and I think they went into gear, but then you run into cultural issues. And by the way, the intensity is not equally applied, because the DeepMind team have the urgency and intensity, and then you go into people on Google Cloud who's been doing the same thing forever, and they're like, some people really care about AI or are doing a lot, but you have a lot of people that just are doing their job, right?
Any other thoughts on Google?
So we use Google Cloud, and I've been publicly complaining about the quality of service and sometimes the product since 2019. And they know that. The team we speak to, sometimes they tell our team, why is your CEO complaining about Google on Twitter? But I think that it's just a fundamental cultural thing where, especially if we compare how Google operates on the cloud side compared to AWS, there's just a huge difference in terms of how serious they are about customer satisfaction. And then we also see really basic things with Google Cloud where, for their managed Kubernetes service, for example, they're not rolling out security patches as fast as they should be. And that's really important to us. And so I just don't think Google's moving fast enough. I think it's a cultural thing. I don't think it can be remedied.
What is the last question? What's the one thing you think startups have an advantage when it comes to speed relative to a Google or other organization?
Well, there are obviously smaller teams that can, just break through all of that bureaucracy and the nonsense that exists with larger organizations where you need dozens of approvals and alignment meetings and a pre-meeting and a post-meeting and a notes and an agenda and a circulation and all that. I think that kind of just the size factor helps a lot. But I think with, big companies can move fast as well, right? It's, I think we're picking on Google, but there's a lot of incredible companies that are very large that have done remarkably well. We can
I think Meta has moved.
Meta has done, exactly, that's my point. Meta has done remarkably well over the last 2-3 years. Everyone wrote them off, I think, in the last couple of years. But what Mark has managed to do is, I think, very, very admirable. Same thing with NVIDIA and same thing with a bunch of other businesses. So I think size is obviously a big deterrent, but you can overcome it.
Great. Well, thank you so much for giving your time in this
Thank
panel.
you. Thank you.
Thank you, Anu.
Thank you.
They just needed a wake-up call to say, hey, guys. Hey, how you
Great.
doing?
Our next panel,
Fantastic panel.
we are going to talk about how to scale go-to-market and business models.
Thank you.
And
Thank
we
you for
have
the kind
three
words.
guests joining us today. We have Maher Lovier, the CEO of Hala. We have Dylan Parker, the CEO of Moment. And we have Rami, the CEO of EvenUp. So thank you for taking the time. I think the first question, just so the audience have context, one-line description of your company. What does it do? Who is your customer and how you make money? So Maher, I'll start with you.
Sure. So thank you, Anu. Hala is, in simple terms, we're building the future bank of SMEs. So we're building a one-stop shop integrated services for the SMEs, from the payment to the financials to the financing. Our typical customer is the micro business that you see on ground. This segment has been underserved. So this is why we exist, is to actually get those from being underserved into being banked.
And how do you make money?
So we make money when our customers make money. So if they make money, we take a cut of what they make. That's in simple
That's a
terms.
good model. Dylan?
Yeah, so Moment is a fixed income trading infrastructure provider. Our platform allows primarily financial advisors, but also some institutional investors to research bonds, trade bonds with automated execution across the major sources of liquidity. In terms of our monetization model, it's a mixture of platform fees and revenue shares on transaction and AUM fees.
So also a portion of the customer value.
Exactly.
Rami? Oh,
It's not working.
not working.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
All right. EvenUp is a generative AI legal tech startup. We draft legal letters that value what injury cases are worth in the US. So our customers are lawyers, and the value prop that we give them is we save them time in drafting these letters, but we also help them get better case outcomes in their cases. It's a SaaS subscription model that charges by volume. So we would ask one of our law firms, how many cases do you do a month? 10 cases a month. We have our 10 cases a month subscription.
Great. So now I'm going to start with you, Rami. Talk about how did you get your first 10 to 15 customers? What did it take for you? Because you were a young company at the time.
Yeah, I remember our first customer, because we serve this fragmented part of the market in personal injury in the US, and there's about 300,000 of these SMBs that we go after. First customers were just cold calls. It was just finding somebody online, somebody who also knew Arabic like me, and I just called them in the US being like, hey, I'm Rami, this is my startup, would love to chat. And honestly, they probably took the meeting less about the company and more because I was similar to the person. But that's what it took, just finding some type of a bond or an affinity to get those customers.
And how have you scaled go-to-market since then?
Yes, so we now have about 100 folks in the go-to-market team, and it starts with having a repeatable sales process. So founder sales is really important to get that initial set of customers, but you can't do that forever. You're going to hit a limit in terms of how much you can scale. So what we had to do is really nail the pitch, make it really easy to understand that you could train this to like 100 plus, again, folks on the go-to-market team. And without that, you're not going to really be able to scale up the business. So it's about getting all of that knowledge that you have in your head as a founder, succinctly summarizing it and making it really easy for folks, especially from folks that don't come from a legal background, to understand.
Dylan, how about you? How did you get your first 5, 10 customers?
So funny enough, when we were actually exploring the idea for Moment, we were just LinkedIn DMing people. And we wanted to get them to talk to us, so we wouldn't say this was our business. We would say, hey, I'm considering joining a company that does X. Would you be willing to provide advice to me on this? And we actually found that to be very successful in getting meetings. And then eventually, we decided to actually do this. And we called up one of the customers and we were like, hey, you know, actually we decided to start this company. And that was how we got our first customer, which was a custodian called Apex. In terms of how we've scaled since then, we're a bit of a weird case because we are highly enterprise focused. Really, if I look at what got us to our Series A, it's like one customer. What gets us to a Series B is probably 4 customers. And then there's really only 60 customers in this market that collectively control, you know, $3 billion in potential revenue for us. So as we've grown our go-to-market team, we've done it a lot slower in terms of headcount. But we've really focused on bringing people who are, you know, senior leaders in the industry who can actually operate autonomously in a almost more business development role than just pure sales.
Great. And Maher, same question for you. How did you get your first 5, 10 customers?
So I think as a gentleman, we're saying like it's always the founders who have to initiate the first sale. Like this is clear. Obviously, our customer base is totally different and the opposite of Dylan's customer base. We serve the micro businesses, so it's more of a scale game. But the initial customers, actually myself and my co-founder, we used to go on the trucks of the biggest FMCG suppliers and go to the market and spend probably a full day with those grocery stores trying to figure out their pain points and how we can serve them. So I think that's how you start, but then eventually if you don't have a product that can sell itself, especially when you're selling to the mass, you will never be able to scale, obviously. Now, when it goes to scaling this, I think the main trick here is you cannot create your own go-to-market and then try to enforce it on the customer. You have to look at the customer and then figure out a model that works for them. In our case, like the typical go-to-market can be do it online or do it via branches in terms of banks, but we were able to create a model that fits this micro segment because this shop owner or shop operator will never leave their shop to go and figure out how to open an account. So we had to I would say, replicate a model that worked in the telecom space and convert it into a model that can work in the fintech space and embed it with technology. So it's somehow out of the box go-to-market that I think it's a natural way of doing it.
Yeah, and your point is really important, which is you cannot come up with a go-to-market and expect the customer to buy that way. You have to understand how the customer interacts with the product to be able to push.
Exactly.
Now, let me ask you one question that has come up in other sessions. People have said if AI takes off, the traditional SaaS business model is dead. Now, none of you here are exactly in the traditional SaaS business models, though that's why I was going to ask you the question. Do you think that's right? Do you think that the seat-based pricing, where people sell software based on number of people, is that going to die with AI?
Yeah, I'm happy to start. So the way we charge is by the unit of work that we can deliver for our customers. And some of the law firms that we are seeing now that are on the cutting edge, they can do as much volume as firms that are 10 times their size. So they have 10 times less employees. So I do think for those types of businesses, their software spend has gone down a lot for the unit of revenue that they have. Now that said, even in our customer base, not all of these folks are on the cutting edge. It will take a long time for everybody to get to that level. You know, the average age of the average attorney in the US is 50 years old. So it'll take some time before we see that. But I think, again, pricing for work and output that's closer to the outcomes of these customers is probably going to be a bigger way, a closer way to the future.
Any other thoughts? It sounds like more value-based, right? You're like, and you all touched on that too. Any other thoughts?
I would just agree. You know, you should charge for the value that you provide. And that was a reasonable metric, or that was reasonably correlated with seats traditionally. But at the end of the day, like whether it's seat-based or transaction fees or anything else, you should just charge for the value you provide.
Last question. Each of you answer this. Company you admire the most and why? It can be any company.
I can start. So to me, it's Apple, and mainly because they were able to create a brand that can sell you things that you don't need. So I think that's very impressive if you create that brand that can create products that are overpriced and that you don't need, and they will make you run after getting it.
think I'm going to say Ramp, because they manage to operate, obviously, in a highly regulated industry, but also ship unbelievably fast.
I would say Rippling for similar reasons, where you're going into a space that was pretty competitive, but through relentless execution, carve out a niche for yourself and become the dominant player.
That's great. Well, thank you so much for giving us your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You can sit second. Paul, yeah. Great. Our third topic today is hiring and managing leaders, probably one of the most important topics when it comes to scaling a company. And we have three amazing guests. We have Paul Daversa, the founder of Daversa Partners. We have Mike, who is the co-founder and CEO of Ambience Health. And we have Abhishek, who is the co-founder and CEO of Material Security. So, Paul, I'd like to start with you, because I know you've done 10,000 searches since founding. But maybe you can tell, and for those of you that don't know, Paul is actually the best search firm and has probably placed most leaders at the best Silicon Valley firms. But maybe talk a little bit about Daversa Partners, the number of searches you have made, and any interesting stats you want to share.
Can you guys hear me? Great. So no different than many founders, I bootstrapped Daversa Partners 30 years ago on the back of a credit card. And the company today has become one of the more important parts of the ecosystem for tech in Silicon Valley. The company has 160 people, 7 offices, 6 in the US, 1 in the UK. And frankly, I think we've been super fortunate to build, I think, what are some of the greatest companies in kind of this modern era over the last 2 to 3 decades. It's been a incredible journey. 95% of what we do is founder-led and founder-based, and so we're part of the founder ecosystem.
That's great. Mike, can you tell us a little bit about Ambience Health, the size of your team and your leadership team?
Anu, thank you for having us. My name is Mike Ng, co-founder and CEO of Ambience Healthcare. We build AI co-pilots for doctors to automate routine tasks and admin so they can focus on the most important work, which is providing the highest possible patient care. We're about 100 to date, and the leadership team we assembled over time. At the very beginning, this is a very well understood problem, but it's a technical challenge to build this product. So clinical research, AI research was at the heart of it. And then later on, we added the product teams and the care transformation team, given that putting in technology into healthcare in of itself has to have its own core competencies. And only more recently have we added in some of the more go-to-market functions like sales and marketing.
Same question for you, Abhishek. Maybe describe what Material Security does, size of your team and your leadership team.
Yeah, so Material is a cybersecurity company that's really focused on helping companies protect their most sensitive data in the productivity suite. So in Microsoft 365 or Google Workspace, we're about 85 people, and my leadership team is about 6.
Yeah. Great. So Paul, I'll start with you. You've worked with so many CEOs. Who is the best at recruiting leaders among the CEOs you've worked with? And what makes them great?
Okay. I get this question a lot, so I'm going to answer it a little bit differently. If you think about the tranches, if we think about Web 2, I'm going to say Evan Spiegel, Tony Xu, Apurva, a host of just incredibly great recruiters, Travis Kalanick, one of the best. If we move into kind of phase 2, cloud moves into next gen, Pedro and Enrique from Brex, just spectacular. I would also include Vlad at Robinhood in there. And then if we move kind of more modern day, I'm working with Sam Altman, who's quite good at recruiting. Winston at Harvey. But if I had to down select on who I think is representative of the greatest, I'm going to have a tie between Grant LaFontaine at Whatnot, who is exceptional, and Pedro. And the reason they're exceptional is because they have a boundless amount of energy for recruiting. And they have this emotional urgency, but they follow it up with vulnerability. And frankly, the unsubstantiated characteristic is these young founders have a very old soul. And they close candidates in living rooms of people twice their age, and they talk about their children, their wives, what it means to build, and they just transcend logic and physics and the dynamics of today.
That's very well said. And having worked with both of them, I can tell you that their emotional maturity is definitely, especially Pedro, given he is, I don't know, maybe now 27, but started the company at 19. So, Mike, question for you. One thing that's very impressive about Ambience is your high talent density. And you really don't say that explicitly, but you meet anyone from Ambience and they're super thoughtful. They're experts in their field. How, maybe give us examples of 1 to 2 people in Ambience that you think really showcase that talent. And how have you been able to do that?
It's a really good question. So one of the things we think about is what's the ingredient for success in this company, in this particular industry? And it turns out what we're building is incredibly hard because you have to have expertise at the intersection of deep AI research, practice of medicine, the business of medicine. And so first and foremost, the minimum viable product is so hard that we wanted to start with an incredibly technical team. I'm super lucky to have one of the best co-founders, my co-founder and chief scientist, Nikhil Baduma. He actually went to math at Stanford at age 12, and he ran his own drug discovery lab at the age 16. 2-time International Biolympiad gold medalist. His first company went through YC, actually exited for $1 billion. And when he went to MIT, he got a perfect GPA and graduated top of his class in 2 years for a 4-year degree. Early admitted into the MIT's MD PhD program. And so a lot of his research actually led to him writing a textbook called The Fundamentals of Deep Learning. Now, what's really important is if you want to build a legendary company, one of the things we think about is the team you build is the company you build. And for AI, given the field is changing so quickly, first and foremost, you need to have unreasonably good talent and collect as many as you can. So I think my co-founder, first and foremost, has the ability to attract some of the most amazing talent where they have standing offers in 10 different companies, but the ability to choose Ambience because of the mission, because of the ability to actually work with peers of their quality. And a major competitor for talent is the groups of like Google, OpenAI, Anthropic, for example. And once you actually have that network density of talent, the talent itself attracts more great people. And then over time, if you're very selective in bringing the right cultural leaders in place as well, they actually self-select. And so as you get to the growth phase and you're hiring really quickly, you have to make sure that your leaders are now the greatest filter for both talent bar and culture bar.
Right. So that's really well said. And in fact, the profile you shared of your co-founder, if Tony Xu were here, he would say it's the example of high slope. The amount they achieved, the amount of output they achieved in the unit of time. And so he always says, don't waste your time interviewing those people, just get them in. Yeah. Right? So Abhishek, for you, you worked with amazing leaders as well, and you also worked at Dropbox with Drew. Yep. I just would love for you to share advice you would give CEOs when it comes to hiring, or mental models that you use when it comes to hiring.
Yeah. I was thinking about some of the qualities that some of the best leaders I've ever worked with have, both at my company, but also in the past. And one thing that I've noticed just repeatedly is they're very good at teaching, and they're very open to being taught. And that combination is very rare, actually. And actually, the more senior you get in your career, I think you start losing the ability to be taught. You get very good at teaching, but you lose the ability to be taught. So in my experience, the best leaders, especially the ones on my team, are very, very good at teaching me about their discipline. And when I interview, I look for that, can you give me some insight really quickly about the function that I haven't heard yet? But they're also very open to being taught. And what that does is it makes them very curious about other disciplines. And I think that's so crucial, especially in early stage companies, because if you think about why startups are able to beat incumbents, which shouldn't really happen. Like, they're more resourced, they have more time in the market, they have all these moats, and yet over and over startups are able to kind of overcome that. I think one of the key reasons is that you have folks that are cross-functional and are very willing to go outside of their function, which reduces overhead, which just makes everything go faster. Truly, in my experience, leads to better products. But all of that starts with this attitude of being willing to be taught. So that's something I really look for in leaders.
That's great. No, that's very well said. So let's switch gears a little bit. Paul, I want to start with you. What are the common mistakes you see CEOs making and when it comes to hiring leaders?
There's a term going around Silicon Valley and lots of pockets around getting signal. And all of my young founders are trying to identify signal. And so I think they're mistaking signal for outcomes. And so what happens is signal is an alert light that gets backed up by data in terms of performance and outcomes and what they achieved. And I think what's manifesting right now is signal is being manifested into instinct. And instinct, therefore, is left in the heart or mind of a 22, 23, 25-year-old founder. So I would say that's number one. Don't confuse signal with outcomes and performance. I think also as it relates to interviewing, I think there's a mistake in terms of science projects, so case studies, versus working sessions. Multiple whiteboard working sessions that allow a founder to understand the orthogonal thinking of an executive. Executives are really busy, and what happens is often those executives that are maybe the up-and-comers have more time to apply rigor to a case study, thus they score higher, superseding the performance of a more seasoned executive just doesn't have the time. And then lastly, most of my founders, the legendary founders, the ones I mentioned that you think about, they also suffer from this imposter syndrome, and so they try to hero it in. So I guess the last piece of advice is they don't work their boards. And I somewhere along the way, along the chain in the ecosystem, I don't think they understand is that when boards and investors give them money, they want to be active and help. And I think they should be more proactive in bringing in the heavy artillery to help close the deal, create value, and bring in those three things are probably most critical.
Those are well said. And in fact, I would say the second one, I have had contention with you because I know I tell all my founders to do the work, give the homework, and Paul would be like, well, they don't have a week to do the homework. Why don't you do a working session? And I do think people should leverage boards more to at least help them interview or sell the candidate at the time of close. Mike, for you, I have a slightly different question, which is, who is the leader you admire the most today and why?
I would choose Sam Altman. I think for those who've known him for a long time, it's the single belief in a really deep mission and to bring people along, even though that they know that research risk in the world is going to be very different. But the ability to attract unreasonable talent where they could work anywhere on many different things, to come together for something you work on for 10 years, 20 years to make a really big impact, and for everyone to row in the same direction. I think we talk about the different skills of leaders, but one that can create a vision so big, so strong, and bring everyone aligned. I think Sam's fantastic in that.
Yes, I would agree. I've worked for Sam for many years, so I will agree with that. And also, I think his belief, not only just personally, but in inspiring other people to have the belief in the mission is like unmatched. Abhishek, a question for you. Why why is hiring leaders so important? What happens when you get a wrong leader in seat?
Oh man, some scar tissue. I think a couple things come to mind. So one is that leaders are amplifiers inside the company. So whatever they do gets amplified 10x. So if it's good, it's amazing. If it's bad, it's horrible. It's catastrophic. I think the other thing is that it takes so long to hire leaders. And if you think about the cost of a bad hire, so you start with, obviously, you're hiring them to do something. So that's not getting done while you're hiring them. Then even if you start hiring them, it takes a little while to hire them. Afterwards, there's some onboarding time where you're investing a lot in them, especially if they're senior. And then if they don't work out, there's some time offboarding. And then there's a search again. And during that entire time, the thing you actually hired them to do has not been done. And so it can, for a senior executive, if you go from start to finish and you end up having to actually exit them because it didn't work out, you're talking like a year, 18 months potentially of just lost time, which for a startup is, a death sentence or can be a death sentence. So I think that's why there's tremendous pressure on growth stage CEOs to get hiring right. Because you kind of know the impact a good hire can have, but you also know the opportunity cost of not having a great leader in place.
That's very well said. Well, with that, we're almost out of time. So thank you so much for taking the time to do this panel.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.